Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and I'm joined once again with Jeff Berkowitz of Public Affairs TV in Chicago. We're going to be going over some of the transition news that's happening just before Thanksgiving as we tape this on November 22nd. And Jeff, just in the last 24 hours, there's been some big news happening around the transition team of President Bush, or President Trump, incoming President Trump. Here, Matt Gaetz, who was selected to be the Attorney General, yesterday withdrew because he was not getting the support from the Senate Republicans, I think, and it was obvious he was not going to get elected. So he called up President Trump and was said he wanted to withdraw his name. And in his stead is Pam Bondi, who is going to be selected as the nominee for Attorney General. Pam Bondi is 59 years old. She has served 2 terms as the Attorney General of the state of Florida. So she does bring in some real credentials that I think some of the people in Congress thought Matt Gaetz had lacked. And Matt Gaetz irritated, as to put it mildly, a lot of the Republicans on Capitol Hill because it was he who led to the ouster of Kevin McCarthy, the Republican House Speaker. And a lot of Republicans have not forgiven him for doing that.
Well, back to Pam Bondi, Terry. She's a former prosecutor, 20 years of experience as the top law enforcement officer in Florida as the Attorney General, and plenty of experience as a prosecutor, local prosecutor prior to then. So she knows actually crime. She also is fairly high level as the former Attorney General of the state of Florida. Trump likes her. He trusts her. She is now a Trump loyalist, and she's qualified. So even MSNBC or MSDNC would say, yes, she's qualified. But they and some others at CNN are worried because they now have come up with this thing, Terry. It's really new, and that if you want to be the Attorney General of the United States, you cannot be a loyalist. That's their word, to the president. So they forgot about JFK making RFK his brother the Attorney General. Yeah. I mean, and they do that.
And they apparently forgot that Eric Holder was the Attorney General under Barack Obama, as Obama referred to him as my wingman.
Yeah, I mean,
no, you're supposed to pick apparently somebody who's your enemy to be Attorney General, according to the left.
Look, so that's the view from the left, but she will survive those criticisms. And if she doesn't have anything lurid reminding us of Matt Gaetz, she will surely...
She's been married twice and divorced twice, but I suspect we're not going to hear much lurid details about Pam Bondi.
So far, not a peep, and she will sail through. Unlike Matt Gaetz, who is said to have 10 hard no's in the Senate. That's NO, 10, and that is as he was campaigning in the Senate, as he was meeting the senators, out was coming yet another second allegation of underage experience when in 2017. And that would have been one too many to have. And so he realized, and Trump realized, this was not going to happen. And in walks Pam Bondi, and we can go on.
And Jeff, to underscore another breaking news, just to bounce around a little bit, is in the last 24 hours, as you and I taped this, we also had Bob Casey, the senator from Pennsylvania on the left, finally gave up and admitted that Dave McCormick, the Republican pictured here on the right, did in fact defeat him. And so now the Republicans they already were going to either way control the Senate, but the final count now is official. It'll be 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. The Republicans managed to pick up 4 seats. And so when we talk about Gaetz, to say no, and you were just saying 10 no's, remember, he couldn't even get confirmed with the Republicans having 53 seats in the majority. So there you go. Gaetz had really stirred up a hornet's nest of opposition, and there was no way they were going to be putting him in.
But close on the heels of Matt Gaetz is Pete Hegseth, the nominee for Department of Defense.
Pete Hegseth here, as we see, yeah, running into some problem. He's a decorated veteran, but he's also, and had worked at Fox News, but he's run into some issues also of a lure detail. But you can go ahead.
Yeah, not underage, but a 30-year-old conservative at a conservative conference in Monterey in 2017.
Conservative woman who was married.
Who was married.
They said she was attacked by him. But you know what? I just want to make sure we don't lose. It says she was attacked to him, but the timeline on that of her allegations have been picked apart. Megyn Kelly in her show today was going in depth. Her videos are all available on YouTube, and was saying that it really was not possible to go by what Megyn Kelly's timeline she'd put together. And by the witness testimony, and she says this is why it's all in the police report and why the police no charges were brought against Pete Hegseth. It may be immoral what he did, but according to her investigation, there was nothing at all out of line.
Look, the dispute there, the he said she said is he says it was consensual. She said it wasn't. She said she thinks something was slipped in her drink, some kind of drug, because when she initially didn't remember much, other than she said she remembered saying no a lot, her memory started coming back in the next day or two. That's when she went to the police.
The fact of the matter is, there's evidence to show that that is not the case. That she was walking on video. You see her. She's not drugged. She gets a hold of her. She leaves his room. She goes back to and joins her husband at a certain time. It's like what she's saying doesn't apparently mesh with the timeline and how a date rape kind of a drug would work. She also was saying, by the way, that where she says she was drugged, according to her, the alleged victim, was that she was drugged in the bar, not in Pete Hegseth's room, where allegedly she would say Hegseth had attacked her. So there's a lot of holes, we should say, to be fair to Hegseth and with the evidence. There's a lot of holes to put a lot of doubt on the allegations against him having attacked her, and does support, therefore, the fact that it was more of a consensual arrangement. I think, anyway, maybe we should leave it there. But
one thing, to be fair to the woman, he said publicly yesterday.
Pete Hegseth?
Pete Hegseth, right? He said to the media, "I was cleared," but actually, the prosecutor, the local prosecutor office said, actually, what it was we looked at that, we investigated it, and we didn't think we could prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is their standard as to whether they would pursue it. So that's not really cleared. And her story is consistent.
Well, let's put it this way.
Terry, let me finish. Her story is consistent with people who were drugged and described the fact that they couldn't remember, but then their memory came back.
No,
it's consistent.
It is not consistent with someone who was drugged because she didn't have enough time. Had she been drugged, I'm going by other reports here, that the way the drug would have worked, the way a drug would have lasted, she didn't have the time because she was seen by people helping Pete Hegseth to his room, who people admitted he was drunk, but she was not. By all testimony, she was sober, not drunk, not under the influence of a drug. She later left his room and rejoined her husband, got in, he did not, she got into bed with him, and said she apparently had fallen asleep when she walked Hegseth to his room or whatever. I mean, she came up with some excuse.
To be fair, moving on, but not to another person, there are other allegations that could get in the way of his approval by the Senate.
That could be. I mean, just we got to be careful when someone's making allegations of a criminal
No, no,
nature.
these are public statements he's made that were on video, so they're not in
Well,
doubt.
look, he had
His
he's cheated on virtually apparently every wife he had. He's on wife number 3.
No, no, hold on. We're off the sex stuff. Let's go to some substantive stuff about Pete. Pete has said, and he doesn't deny it, that he does not think women should be in the military, serving in combat roles.
Right. Well, a lot of
He does
military
not
men
think-
would agree with that.
Well, that could be a problem in this day and age, and you
Or not.
hear about
Or
that.
or it could
No.
not be a problem in this day and age.
That's
I mean,
that's why we have advice and consent constitutionally by the
obviously,
U.S.
obviously, and I mean, we don't want to say like everyone agrees that women should be in the foxhole. It does complicate the military mission, and Pete Hegseth's position would be that we want a Defense Department not as a DEI ladder, but we want people out in the field in defense to have the strongest army to protect the nation. Now, you can have, I mean, you could get into debates about this, about, well, what about a woman flying a fighter jet where she's in the cockpit alone? That would be different. So I think it makes a big difference if we're talking about women serving in the military on a naval ship or in the Air Force as compared to being deployed in a rice paddy somewhere overseas. These are legitimate issues. I just want to think we refer. But the other thing, by the way, Jeff, let's talk about some of the breaking news again. 24 hours. We had just in the last, just today, in the Alvin Bragg case against President Trump, where Trump, Judge Merchan there, whose daughter was a major fundraiser for the Democratic Party, and Merchan has been criticized for not recusing himself, but he today granted President-elect Trump a request to a motion to dismiss the charges, and Merchan said Trump's attorneys have until December 2nd to file a motion for dismissal, and New York DA Bragg has until December 9 to respond to the motion to dismiss. So that also, and that is a partial victory, you might say, for President Trump, and we'll have to see if finally that goes away. I think there's a lot of pressure probably behind the scenes on Merchan to get that cleared up, and certainly in light of the election results.
I don't know. Who's putting pressure? The Democrats, you think, are going to pressure him? I don't think so. Who's putting
Do I
pressure
think who's
on
going to
the-
pressure who?
Who's going to pressure Judge Merchan to dismiss this or put this?
I think people
get
within the
rid-
judicial branch of New York are trying to say the jig is up, get rid of this. You're making
Yeah, I do.
you're making the New York judicial system look like it's nothing more than a bunch of political hacks.
Yeah, the only thing that could be worse than the appearance of the judicial system in New York would be the hack judges in Illinois. So it's not known for its sobriety in terms of making judicial decisions in New York, nor is the Illinois.
Well,
court
at least in Illinois, we haven't brought her charges against Donald Trump and engaged in that lawfare. So that's one thing to be thankful for. So a lot of changes coming up, and Trump has named a lot. He's moving fast. A lot of his cabinet and some of the key things, but not the U.S. Treasury Secretary. That's one of the key decisions now that he has to come as far as the key posts within the administration and the cabinet. There's 3 or 4 people that are speculated about that might be made U.S. Treasury Secretary. But, you know, knowing President Trump, he has shown us many times that he could pick somebody that would be kind of a surprise to many. So we'll have to see what happens there. If you,
We could say the 2 most prominent names as of today, as of November 22, are David Warsh, a former governor of the Federal Reserve. As people would know, there are 7 governors on the board of governors on the Federal Reserve. He was one of those 7. So he's somewhat more establishment than the other name being mentioned here. He's more conventional on his view of tariffs, and we should tell people that the Secretary of the Treasury, or Treasury Secretary is how we put it, he's really not the treasurer, but it's put as secretary, the Treasury Secretary, has a lot to do with tariffs. And so, although he's going to be guided to whoever is there, obviously by Donald Trump's views, he will have something to say if he's Treasury Secretary. And the second name that's thrown out a lot now currently is Mark Rowan, Apollo Global, $750 billion wealth management investment company. Trump likes that. He respects people who've succeeded in that area. Wall Street likes that. But he's better on tariffs for Trump. But the question is, what does the market say? Trump is very sensitive to what the markets think of who he puts at Treasury or who he puts as the Treasury Secretary. And so there are other names. He may split it. He's also trying to decide who would be his National Economic Council chair, which in some ways is over the Treasury Secretary. So he may put Warsh there and then put somebody somebody more in tune with Trump as NEC chair. And predicting what Trump is going to do until it's done is very difficult. Okay, as we've seen.
And, knowing Trump and how he's been picking people from Fox News, who knows? He could be picking Larry Kudlow, who has a show on the afternoon every day. And Kudlow had worked both in the Reagan administration, but also with President Trump. So Trump, it wouldn't be much of a surprise, somewhat of a surprise, if he picked Kudlow for one of the economic positions. I don't think for Treasury Secretary, but certainly one of the other members of the economic team.
Well, just two other names to mention, and then we can get out of this, is that Scott Bessent was mentioned early on. He could be the NEC, National Economic Council chair, but he was mentioned previously for Treasury Secretary. Trump seems to like him. He's a hedge fund manager, hedge fund executive. The one other name comes up, Bob Lighthizer, who Trump likes a lot from his days as U.S. Trade Representative.
Right.
So he likes.
And he's very good on trade, on tariffs, rather.
And so now that the AG is kind of resolved, I think he'll turn in the next few days to Treasury Secretary.
Yeah, that could be, and so the Trump administration is moving forward, and the way they're going so fast, this could be, and I don't think that when we look at the lead that the majority that the Republicans are going to have in the Senate, I think most of these cabinet posts that are left, we'll have to see what happens, as we already discussed with Hegseth, but I think that most of these other people will go through without any other stumbles. I think Pam Bondi will be approved relatively easily. And we'll have to see, maybe Robert Kennedy conceivably, but I think when we look at like the last four people who served as Secretary of Health and Human Services, the current secretary is an attorney from New York. And when Bill Clinton picked a law professor, Donna Shalala, if you remember. So the people that say Robert Kennedy doesn't have a background in medicine, well, he has the kind of background that the other secretaries of Health and Human Services have had. So that shouldn't be a major issue on that.
Two caveats there. One is he may have too much of a background, if not background, at least involvement in medicine. His views on vaccines. People had said he's anti-vax. He said, I'm not anti-vax.
He's not anti-vaccine.
But I think what he is his plus really is his strength, at least in terms of what he says. He believes in science. He believes there ought to be debate within science, like we didn't have in COVID. People who had different views from the government in COVID, were squashed. Their freedom of speech.
And that would be a good thing. I mean, I think what we've seen with the Dr. Fauci controversy. I mean, here's a guy who was a bureaucrat, bureaucrat, worked in his role for about 40 years, but he was coming out with all kinds of statements that later showed that they were not true. That he first said masks don't work. He was right on that. Then he said masks do work. He made other statements during the COVID year. So, the idea that you have to be a doctor and have a background doesn't necessarily fly in the wake of what we saw from Fauci and some of the other statements during the COVID years.
There were plenty of accredited doctors, accredited professors of medicine at Stanford University, involved with the Hoover Institution, who were basically squashed. Their views were suppressed in a variety of ways. So that's one strength. The other view is he is hostile to big pharma, or at least he wants to be skeptical and question some of the things that big pharma does, big pharmaceuticals, whatever you want to call them, and that he will get some support from liberals on
I
that.
I think you're right, and I think this is why I think Robert Kennedy would be not just an interesting selection, but good to serve. And who knows? Is he going to be there 4 years? Who knows? But he brings a different perspective, and I have said for years, change does not normally come from within an organization. The change agents come from without the organization. And
Well,
Bobby Kennedy would be good in that too. I think when you look at American healthcare, any number of people will say we have a lot of problems and we need some fresh eyes on this, not people who have spent their career in the healthcare system.
Well, we can get out on this note that, to be fair to everybody, it has been raised, this allegation that he groped a nanny somewhere along the line, somebody's nanny, and he groped her. And what he said in response publicly
I
was,
think we should have a
look,
statute of limitations on how many sexual innuendos we can bring up in a show here.
well, no, but here's the point. His response to that was, folks, I'm no church boy. I think the phrasing is, I'm no choir boy, but he made it, I'm no church boy. Terry, you would know with two nuns as sisters what the right phrase is. So the point is, I think,
I
yes,
think
I
you
think
say
he's
I'm
gonna
no
go
altar
through.
boy would be the right phrase.
Altar boy. There you go. I stand corrected. Okay. So yes, I think he'll get through, but we'll hear some healthy debate, pros and cons, I think. Another
My
big one that we
betting
haven't
would
mentioned,
be that Bobby Kennedy does make it through. I
but
think.
the other big one that's a little unusual, we should note for people, is the FBI director. Okay.
Right.
This Chris Wray is only in his seventh year of what usually is a 10-year appointment these
It is
days.
a 10-year
But
appointment. Yeah.
Trump has made it clear he wants him out. There was a name floated. Mike Rogers was going to be the guy. Trump has said, I never even thought about that. And he got a lot of resistance from people who want somebody more likely to blow up. Or as some people said, you should take that FBI building and make it a museum of the deep state and send the 700 or 7,000 or whatever it is, people who work there, send them out, and they should go arrest real criminals, okay? Not the people who are trying to
Well,
exercise
certainly Ray is going to be
their
replaced. Either he's
state.
going to be resigning or be fired. I mean, but Christopher Wray, who was selected by President Trump to replace James Comey, Ray will be out. And Mike Rogers would be an interesting pick. He served in the Congress on the Intelligence Committee, so he does have that background. He ran for the Senate. He barely lost just in November, or just earlier this month, we should say. And Mike Rogers is very familiar. I interviewed him about 10 or 12 years ago in Chicago, and we were talking about the amount of hacking that goes on daily. So he is very attuned to the threat from Iran, Russia, North Korea, and the Chinese on the sensitivity of the American security and the cyber threat. So, which is also a major issue of our time.
Well, the one other we shouldn't let go, that the one other person, the one other nomination that will see significant controversy, I predict, is Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. She has been relatively ignored in the hubbub of the last week or so on others. But, Nikki Haley has come up, or at least I saw a tape of her saying at some point, of Nikki Haley saying that we can't have somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who's I think she called her a Syria sympathizer, Syria, China, Russia sympathizer. And she has made statements along those lines. Tulsi has. So I think there's going to be a fair
Well,
amount of controversy
I
at some point on her nomination.
look. Well, I can't say it wouldn't be a problem, but I would say the current director of national intelligence was an art major who ran a bookstore. So, it's not like all of the people that we have put into that position had spent years in the CIA. That's just not the case. So Gabbard, who is still in the military, in the reserves, was a lieutenant colonel, probably brings a lot more to the table than the current director of national intelligence. So, given that and the fact that we can see if the Democrats are willing to vote against not only a woman, but a woman who was a Democratic member of Congress, we'll have to see. Maybe they will. But I think with the majority that they have, unless there's something really wrong with a candidate, as we saw with Gates, and we already talked about that, unless there's something really wrong with Tulsi Gabbard, I don't think that she's going to be held up.
Well, we'll see how vocal the U.S. senators want to be. We'll see whether they agree with you that there's not a problem with her. And it's not so much her experience, it's her policy positions that she has stated publicly. And the question is, look, the big issue in our remaining few minutes here that will play out over the next month or two on these nominations. Donald Trump has a view. He was elected, he would say, for this. He wants to blow up a few places. Not literally. Nobody's accusing him of blowing up the FBI building or blowing up the DOJ building.
Well, I don't know. Get to what you are saying. What do you mean blow up?
Well, he wants to dramatically change what he and many others think is a deep state at DOJ, a very dangerous...
Which is obviously it is.
Well, and that's my point. And he wants to change that. And to do that, that's why he chose Matt Gaetz. Okay, because he thought he was the guy who would go in there.
Pam Bondi is going to be on his side on that, and she brings in a lot of evidence. She's going to have other people. Right. She's not going to be the Lone Ranger from Trump in the Department of Justice. She's going to be undersecretaries also appointed. Look, we could spend maybe in another show more time on this, but Trump wants to take on the federal bureaucracy that, one, is too expensive, too bloated, getting in the way of getting things done. It takes 22 years to build a bridge in America because of all the bureaucracy that has to go on before anyone starts building the actual bridge. That's according to the Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation. So there are many things wrong, and we have talked about the Beltway mentality and people working in a bubble in New York, Washington, D.C., So Trump may also be moving some of these agencies of government around the country, relocating them, so some might be in Atlanta, some might be in Texas, and to get the bureaucracy integrated with the American people, not where they're just circulating with the lobbyists, the congressmen, and other members of that bureaucracy. It's groupthink, and they have a warped vision of America because they don't know what America is really about. They know what Washington, D.C. is about. So that's the idea of what Trump is coming from and his administration and the kind of things they're going to try to be tackling. And as we said last week, Jeff, let's remember that right now the federal government's paying over $1 trillion on interest payments on the national debt, which cannot be sustained. We have doubled the national debt in the last 8 years, from 19 trillion, nearly doubled, to now about 37 trillion dollars. And where did the money go? I mean, I don't see any difference. I don't see that our bridges are painted in gold, our streets are free of potholes, our schools are all well heated. You know,
Jerry,
this is the big thing that has to be taken on.
Before we run out of time, we need to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and say the one other thing, major obstacle that could become a problem. We've seen how strong the Senate majority is at 53-47. We haven't been watching closely what will be the majority in the House. Some speculate when all the voting is done, it's still not done yet, or counted, when the votes are all counted, it may be a 2-vote margin, and can you really govern well? So people will want to see what is the majority in the House. He may back off from some of these appointments of House members to his cabinet, because he needs to have those people, and he really can't have them have a special election take 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's going to be very difficult. As Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker, said, Mike, Johnson, the current House Speaker. It's going to be difficult when you have such a slim majority. And then, you know, you never know. You could have a member pass away for whatever reason and find yourself losing the majority, which would certainly be a disaster for the Trump agenda. We got to go, Jeff. Once again, thanks for watching, folks. Give us your comments and have a great Thanksgiving.